Good evening. Of course I will. Board Member Jeff Bennett. Board Member Deirdre Brown.
Here.
Board Member Elizabeth Callahan.
Here.
Board Member Nubia Dwell-Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Regina Eckert.
Here.
Board Member Bill Gifford.
Here.
Board Member Bimal Kapatia.
Here.
Board Member Will Meyer.
Here.
Board Member Shayna Sackett-Gable.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in the following manner, that the written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board at 2:30 p.m. on January 3rd, 2025. That said notice was sent via email to Maplewood and South Orange Township clerks and the editors of the News Record, Star Ledger, Tappan DeSoma, and the Village Green. I'd like to make a motion to enter into executive session at 6:34 p.m. to discuss attorney-client matters, personnel and negotiations. The length of the executive session is estimated to be 75 minutes, after which the public meeting of the board shall reconvene and proceed with business where formal action will be taken. May I have a second? Thank you, Eckert. Thank you. Oh, all in favor? Great. Let's go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our preliminary budget approval meeting. Before we listen to the preliminary budget presentation, I have some things to share. I will be very brief. I'd like to acknowledge all the hard work of our superintendent, our BA, assistant BA, central office, and school principals. They've all been hands on deck for weeks to engage in an audit, rebuild our district budget, and prepare the 2025-26 budget with looming tight deadlines and deficits to close, while also forecasting for the future. All of this with 2 new BAs who have not even been here for 6 months yet. So a big thank you to their unwavering dedication thus far. I would like to remind everyone what tonight's meeting is for. This is not a meeting to vote on the budget. Tonight we vote to allow our district to send along the preliminary budget to the county executive superintendent. And the deadline to send it is March 19. This process is required so that the county executive superintendent can address any issues that the district might have to fix. Budget adoption will take place on April 24, 2025. Until then, the district and the board will continue to review the budget, address concerns, make adjustments, and recommendations to ensure the budget aligns with our goals and priorities. With that said, I know there will still be some questions tonight from my fellow board colleagues, as new information came to us down to the wire this week. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Bing and Mr. Moody for the presentation. Thank you.
If I could interject for one moment, this is the point in the agenda where the board president would typically call out the birthday that we've just had. And so I'll just jump in and say a very happy birthday to board president Nubia DeValville.
Thank you.
Would you like to say some words prior, or should I just jump right in?
Jump right in and I'll
All
do a
right.
little back and forth,
All right.
little pickleball.
I like it. I like it. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I will say that, you know, it has been a daunting and arduous process, but in fact, approaching it with fresh eyes and new kind of afforded us a certain latitude, a necessary latitude, because we had to engage in discovery to figure out exactly what was before us, what had been planned, what had been budgeted in the prior year. So, you know, it made for a circumstance where, by the very nature of the undertaking, we had to really dig into this in excruciating detail. And as such, we were able to kind of get some, I believe, unprecedented insight into the moving forces in the budget. And it's good to engage in a comprehensive process like this as you set up for the future, because all of the work and discovery and dealing with the actual realities of the budget empower your way forward and allow you to really plan for the subsequent budget year, but then, and it allows you to actually extend your view multiple years. So that's it. I'm gonna, next slide if you want to, give a little bit of overview of our budget process, right? This is how I'll proceed here. I'll give a 30,000-foot view of all of what I just discussed, how we engaged in the process, and then how we went into the various other areas like projected revenue and enrollment, expenditures, tax impact, and our budget calendar. So next slide.
I do want to just really point some big picture points here. Some big picture points. In our budget, there are no RIFs. There are no reductions in force. We are not anticipating any reductions in force by the time this budget is finalized in April. I want to make that very clear. Also want to make clear, and you'll see this in the budget, that we invested in facilities, which has not been done for quite some time. You'll see a $5 million increase in facilities to ensure that our buildings are suitable for our scholars. You'll also see strategic investments to lower costs, whether that's a child study team, phys ed, security facility. You're going to see strategic investments where in 2-3 years, we're hoping that's going to pay off in lowering such costs as out-of-district tuition, litigation, things of that nature. And you're also going to see a focus on the next 3 years. Right? So as we looked at this, we didn't just look at 25, 26, we looked at 26, 27, 27, 28. And just real quick, because I know this question is going to come up, you're going to see that in the state aid numbers, when everything was entered, our projection for student population is an increase for 2026. It's an increase to 7,143. Now, I'm going to also remind you of the demographic study you had done, I believe in 2023 in this district. You had 2 projections in that based on 2 different formulas. So projection 1, based upon 8% turnover of long-term home ownership, which is statewide, that's the average. The prediction was 7,147, within 4 of what's currently in the state homeroom. Now, on the other formula that they used to predict a projection of students, they based it on historical data of South Orange and Maplewood home turnover. That result was a decrease in students to 6,799. So you're going to see this, we're using the state number that's populated on the homeroom, because that's what's given to us, which is 7,143, which is an increase of about 150, around 150 students next year. So that's the number we're using. So I just wanted to nip that in the bud because I know you had that demographic done in 2023. We're probably going to need to get another one done because it ends in 2026, that demographic, as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Bing. Actually, I believe we're at 6831, so 7143 is like, 210 or so. So I'm going to go in now into a bit of the budget development process. Next slide. So we were tasked from the beginning with engaging in a much more transparent process. I personally have a philosophy that a budget is a conversation, broadly across stakeholder groups and to explore the depth and the breadth of the moving forces there. So it dovetailed with what I tend to do, and we had our marching orders. So essentially, we engaged in small group board meetings along the way, several iterations of small group meetings with our board members. As we know, this is the board's budget, and it's set up to reflect the board's priorities. We also engaged in speaking with the community via board meetings, via board committee meetings, and via community conversations, budget advisory committee meetings. We've had 2 budget advisory committee meetings where we've addressed about a 40, 50 member body, receiving their questions, concerns, and articulations of their priorities. We also have scheduled town halls, and we've done multiple, Mr. Bing has done multiple town halls, and we'll do more. Also surveys out to the district and other district correspondents. There's also been advocacy in Trenton. Superintendent Bing has gone down and made it clear how the State Funding Reform Act current formula does not serve us as well as it could. And then there's also ongoing town halls scheduled for March 25th, April 2nd, April 4th, and town committee meetings with both South Orange and Maplewood. Next slide. Unfortunately, this is difficult to see here, but essentially, this is our budget calendar, and it reflects some of the things I've just spoken about. Our Budget Advisory Committee second meeting, which was on March 6th. We have the board meeting where we are today. And I should note that March 19th is our deadline for when we have to submit the budget and with the executive county superintendent. We also have another Finance Committee meeting, Finance Facilities and Technology meeting. And we have our final budget to the full board for review on April 17th. Our April 24th is our final meeting, our public hearing on the 25-26 budget. It's the final budget presentation to be submitted to the county. So are we going back to revenue here? Okay. Actually, if you could advance the slide, thank you. So for this 25-26 budget calendar, the highlight is that we must submit a preliminary budget to the county on March 19th. Final budget is due to the county at the end of April, and our budget remains a work in progress. This is our preliminary budget. Next slide. Here we're on to our projected revenue. So I'm going to start from the top here, but and give you the breakdown of the components of revenue and the changes from 24-25 to 25-26. Essentially, we had local tax levy of $136 million that grows to $140 million with a 2% increase in tax levy. We had an enrollment of healthcare adjustment, 1.3 this year, not a health benefit waiver, but an enrollment waiver of $850. Our state aid did, however, grow by $619K, and our maintenance reserve utilization in this budget is projected to be $2.5 million versus $1.5 million in the prior year. Extraordinary aid we're budgeting $2.5 million this year, whereas in the prior year we budgeted $2 million. Our actual number was 2.421, so we feel comfortable with budgeting extraordinary aid at 2.5 million. We also had, in the 24-25 year, and we'll go into this a little bit more deeply, our audit has certain uses of fund balance that's baked into the audit. And so, having finished our audit during our last meeting, our fiscal year 24 audit renders us with a $7.044 million draw from our fund balance, as well as a projected $6.893 million draw from our fund balance to be budgeted in 25-26. You'll also see later in the presentation that we're budgeting to use about $5.7 to $5.8 million in unassigned fund balance to help fund the 25-26 budget. Our semi-revenue, whereas in 24-25, we were called upon to budget 100% of that at $195K. There was a change in the state calculation, which brought our full 100% budgeted number for semi, which is the state Medicaid initiative, down to only $24,788. We are predicting interest earned of about $600K and rents and royalties of $200, miscellaneous revenue of $331, and that's our total for general operating, which is projected to be for 25-26 $171,465,152. And when you look into our special revenue fund, we have IDEA funds and ESEA funds projected to be about 1.5. We've been advised by our county BA and others across the state, given the macro environment at the federal level, to budget at around 70% of our 24-25 award, and that's what we did. So that's 1.5 million in IDEA and ESEA, non-public aid of 146,000, and preschool aid of 9.5 million. Total special revenue fund projected to be 11.2 million in our budget year. And then on to our debt service fund.
I think you do see some opportunities here. If you take a look at that sheet, you've got opportunities for revenue streams and facility usage. We're only at about 200, right? That number can be substantially higher. Also, the preschool aid. You see that we had an increase this year. I think we can get an increase for next year, and we could really look at those funds a little more strategically and how we use them.
Thank you, Mr. Bing. So in our debt service, our debt service tax levy is around 5.056 million. Budgeted fund balance for debt service 5.152, and debt service aid at 2.823, which totals our debt service fund at 13.033 million. Then we are called upon to make a contribution to our preschool. Last year, that contribution was 1.525 million. This year, it will be 1.747 million, with a total revenue of 193,970 and 884. If we were to add the preschool contribution, that's about 195 million total budget. So next slide. Next slide is just a picture of the components of revenue. Essentially, we're looking at about 82% is our local tax levy, our state aid being about 7.8%, use of our maintenance reserve about 1.5, budgeted fund balance at 7.3, and local revenue 0.7%.
Semi is also there, but it is so small you cannot see it.
Right, because the semi is 24,788. On to enrollment. If you proceed to the next slide, and Superintendent Bing kind of touched on this earlier, but enrollment for the district, and this is just the high school. There are two subsequent slides that look at middle school and elementary schools, but there was a peak of at around 2019-20, and then pandemic saw for some declines, and then we're slowly and steadily moving back upwards, but we are projected to experience some enrollment growth. Next, we have our middle schools, similar story, and our elementary schools. Next slide. One thing of note here is that if you look out over the past 8 or 9 years or so, we've had growth in enrollment and then sharp decline, but over those declining years, since 2019, we hired about 471 staff, 276 of which have been teachers.
So you've had an increase of 471 staff with a significant decline in population since 1920. I'll repeat that. You've had a significant increase in staff hirings of 471 with a decrease in a significant decrease in student population. 276 being teachers for the significant decrease in student population.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So on to a review of our expenditures. And of course, as with a balanced budget, we're now looking at the expense side of that budget for 2025-26. And I'll speak to the major categories here. Salaries, as you can see, exist at about $81.9 million of our budget. Benefits at around an additional $23 million of our budget. It's about $14 million in building and grounds. And of course, we have our older buildings, so we're aggressively attempting to maintain them, and it calls for some utilization of that maintenance reserve. Also of note, our transportation costs are at around 10.9 or about $11 million. Tuition, $13.5 million. Special services, about $9.4 million. Regular programs instruction, $2 million. Curriculum, library and staff training, around $2 million as well. And central office, $761. Athletics and co-curricular, around $528. So those are the broad categories of use. We went through the sources of our funding, and these are the uses of our funding projected for 25-26. Next slide. Some highlights from the various different categories. As it pertains to salaries, benefits, and contracted services, our budget for salary increases is consistent with our projected rates are consistent with our current negotiations where we are in that process. Our increases in projected health benefits costs are 17%. Our projected increases in our utilities costs are 27%. 15% increase projected for other categories of insurance. These are based on guidance being given to us by the state, our brokers, and various different professionals around the state. These are circumstances affecting all of the districts around the state and actually broadly around the country. Also, we're projecting increases of 5% in custodial. Now, and based on visible trends, we're exploring adjusting the language in current contracts and other vendor options around these different categories of expenditures.
Now, for South Orange Maplewood School District, that's a big piece of the pie, because you have privatized since 2015. I would say the majority of what we have, custodial facilities, transport, busing, is all privatized. So you're looking at paraprofessionals, HVAC technicians, plumbers, electricians, painters, lunch aides, bus drivers. A lot of folks fall under those categories. So, one of the things we have been doing since we've been here is really taking a fine-tooth comb through every contract that we currently are under.
Thank you. Yes, that is the circumstance. Next slide. Tuition. We're projecting for some increased costs for special education out-of-district placement for tuition, and those projections are based on our anticipated demand for services following a thorough review of our projected needs. Next slide. Transportation.
Just real quick, Amani, sorry. Keith, can you just go back to that previous slide? Just real quick, and we discussed this over the last few meetings. Last 3 years, special services has gone above and beyond their allotted budget, in part due to out-of-district tuition. That is why you're seeing an increase of $1 million for placeholders, just in case we have students who need to go out of district at an average of anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000. We've brought 6 out-of-district students back into district over the last 6 months. We're hoping to continue that trend by expanding, again, investing in order to save, expanding our continuum of services, which includes expanding our ERI program, which we'll be offering tuition to other districts to fill, and also our CAT program at our high school, again, for kids that are school phobic, inviting other districts who want to send tuition-based kids to that program, and we'll continue to pursue those sort of things.
Thank you. Yep, on to transportation. In transportation, we're increasing the money allocated to transportation costs by around 3.5% in our projections, which is consistent with growth of inflation growth, and also navigating our contract conversations. We're reviewing and exploring options and even looking to employ perhaps a hub, or we're evaluating a hub system to enhance efficiency and increase route timeliness, all consistent with what we're hearing from our population. We're also reevaluating all in-district routes to explore opportunities to refine travel, optimize bus sizes, and even optimize the capacity utilization of buses.
Now, transportation, as we all know, is one of our bigger nuts in this budget. And the way to reduce transportation is efficiency of routes and also reducing stops. Our next community conversations is going to be very centered on the topic of transportation and busing. We'll discuss the hub model and a few other models and get some feedback from folks in regards to possibly exploring that system.
Exactly. Next slide. This slide just demonstrates that our budget does balance, and that our operating revenue of $171 million, our special revenue of 11.2, and our debt service will actually serve the expenditure side of our income statement. Next to budget challenges. Yes, thank you. Now, I'd like to say here that, of course, our budget challenges were myriad, but this kind of represents some of the budget realities that were the product of our discovery, of our research, and our year-over-year perspective. So, during 24-25 year thus far, we've engaged in some prudent fiscal management. Superintendent Bing called for a spending freeze in January, and that process is likely to return about $9 million in unexpended funds to our fiscal 25 fund balance, right? Fiscal 25 year-end June 30 fund balance. And approximately $5.8 million of that will be allocated for use in the 25-26 fiscal year budget. Also, in order to address urgent maintenance needs across the district, $2.5 million in one-time projects have been slated for funding via the maintenance reserve. Now, I should also mention here in this third bullet point that $6.8 million in audited fund balance was budgeted for the 25-26 fiscal year, and such is the nature of the audit process. The state has determined that it's fiscally prudent for about 2% to be allocated by law to the subsequent fiscal year. So, and I'll get deeper into this, but to recap, that means that in 24-25, our audit rendered $7.04 million in fund balance for use in the 24-25 year, as well as $6.893 million for use in the 25-26 year.
That was
So-
put in place, you're going on 15 years of that now. It's meant for tax relief and to mediate expenditures. So that is a law, 2%'s got to go over every year.
And as such, you know, one of the things we covered in our audit in our last meeting was we had a fund balance of around 32 million, but we're projecting a decline of that fund balance, that it's kind of a potential rapid decline, which kind of tells the story of an impending fiscal cliff that requires prudent fiscal management of us over the course of 25 and for the foreseeable future in 25-26 and 26-27.
So part of our work as a team is to really focus on that fund balance, capital reserve, maintenance reserves, and make sure we're building those back up. Right, that as financial stewards for both these towns, that's probably going to be our biggest responsibility moving forward, is to really start building up those three areas.
And it's kind of, and the next screen kind of provides a little bit more visibility into this. If you go to the next slide, what you see here is the picture that I was just discussing. June 30, 24 audited fund balance of $32 million. Along with that audit, to be used in fiscal 25, $7.04 million, as well as decisions that are from our predecessors, $4.267 from the capital reserve and $1.5 million from the maintenance reserve. And that totals to a $13 million use of fund balance that came from our audit, essentially was prior to the beginning of this fiscal year. The projected additions in 2025 make for a projected return to fund balance of around $9 million, but there's also, for budgeting in 2026, an audited dollar amount of 6.893, plus the projected 5.8 that I mentioned earlier, and the $2.5 million use of maintenance reserve, which make for a $15 million use of fund balance, projecting a $13.4 million fund balance at the end of fiscal year 26, if we do not engage in prudent management and return additional funds to balance. So that's our objective, is to explore efficiencies over the course of the year and just manage the budget to actual over the course of the next fiscal year and return more to fund balance than what's currently projected here.
And we did that this year, right? We tightened our fiscal belts. No programming was hurt, and nothing facing students was hurt, and we were able to put aside $9 million. So, as we move forward, that's what we're looking to do to build back up that fund balance.
Next slide. So these, our budget challenges included, reductions of expenses and increasing revenue, and this is kind of how our 25-26 budget was rendered. As Mr. Bing mentioned, we have been engaging and are continuing to engage in vendor contract optimization. We're leaving unfilled vacant positions where there's demand lacking unfilled. Retirements that are happening, as well as internal transfers, have made for some reduction in projected expenses. Our increases in revenue are, of course, our 2% increase to tax levy, our enrollment adjustment that I mentioned earlier of $850K, projected miscellaneous revenue increase, extraordinary aid increase of $500K, and our increase in state aid of $619,000. Also, we did experience a $1 million increase in preschool revenue.
All right, so I do want to emphasize the point that we are going to be leveraging those 276 hires since 2019-20 to fill vacancies, so we're not hiring externally and adding on to the budget. I want to say that again. We're going to be using an internal transfer process that most districts use across the state to fill vacancies that we can fill with proper certified teachers.
Okay. So next slide. On to our tax impact, and it's just a summary of the revenue. So on to the next slide. So in 24-25 tax levy for operating was that 138 million. 25-26 is our 141 million based on our tax levy. The tax impact is 2.62% increase. That is as a result of also including the enrollment waiver. Our 24-25 tax levy for debt service was 5.6 million. For 25-26, it's 5 million as the bond issuance kind of further amortizes. So our tax impact for debt service declined by 9.97%. So the 24-25 total tax levy was 143,783,000, and the 25-26 total tax levy 146,837,000, with a total tax impact of 2.12%. Next slide. This is just a picture of our bond issuance. There's been several bond issuances since 2014. As you can see, 2014, 15, 19, 20, 3 in 2021, and 1 in 2024. The principal and interest for which total that $13.033 million in debt service.
So looking back at 2014 bond, because nobody obviously was here for that, we are looking at water repairs through the district. You're looking at roofs for South Mountain, as well as wings B and D at Columbia High School. And then you're also looking at Montrose general alterations to that building. That was the 2014 purpose or how the bond was utilized.
Thank you. On to the next slide. So kind of summarizing budget highlights here, you can go to this slide. Essentially, what we're talking about is $2.5 million in maintenance reserve use for one-time projects to maintain our buildings. We do feel it's tremendously important to cultivate the student environment and make certain that we're allocating resources towards the care and safety and a place for solid instruction for our scholars. We also reprioritized additional projects to future Board of School Estimates bond issuances where possible. We also engaged in restructuring and redistributing vendor contracts, which is still ongoing. We also did not budget for unfilled vacancy positions where demand is not present. And ultimately, we have our continuing strong interest, and in fact, we budgeted for the purpose of having no reduction in staff, and that's what we've been able to achieve with this preliminary budget. And so we're hoping to gain the board's support.
Just a reminder, obviously, for everybody, our current capital project will be ending around September of next year. SOMS is the only school left for the HVAC improvement, air quality improvement, as well as wiring for fire and security. Keith, Mr. Bonds, Director of Technology, has also put in his budget for 25-26, finishing off the infrastructure wiring at CHS. So that will also be completed. We will continue to work on our work. This is a work in progress. Obviously, we have till late April, so we'll continue to work on the work. As noted, right now we have 3 town halls scheduled. If more is needed, we will. Hopefully, we will be presenting at the South Orange and Maplewood committees as well. So we look forward to those dates and just trying to make this as transparent as possible.
With that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so questions? Anyone want to go on? Yes, Will.
So thank you for that presentation. I appreciate the intense amount of work that the business office and superintendent have done over the past number of months, weeks, and days and hours leading up to tonight to put this together. I want to ask a question with regard to the increases in revenue that were listed. We mentioned the enrollment adjustment, about $850,000. And at the beginning of the presentation, Superintendent Bing, you mentioned the difference in the projected enrollments between what the state thinks, which is a significant increase, versus our formula or the local formula, which should suggest a small decrease. Can you just remind the board and the public what the impact would be to our budget, depending on what the actual enrollment numbers are?
Yeah, so it looks, just a little background, it looks like the state as well as our demographic individual utilize the Rutgers model, which is the most popular model out there. Every district uses it. It's quite accurate. I've used it twice. And then it looks like, as I noted, they use just historical data for the drop in population. Obviously, if there's an increase, a substantial increase in population, you're looking at a close scrutinization of resources. That's class size, that's how spaces are used, that's materials. That also impacts transportation, obviously. So there's a lot of factors that come into play as your student population grows. Obviously, going with the state aid number is the best number to go with. That's the number we've been going with this budget. So that 7,143 number is what we have in this budget, and that's what we're budgeting for. But if you're looking long-term, as we noted, I would recommend another demographic study, at least taking us out to 2030, 2031, 32, so we get a better idea of where we're moving. Also, based upon that numbers, I mean, the additions to the buildings were a very prudent move.
Regarding our enrollment, something that school budget watchers might want to think about is that the fact that our enrollment fell by so much after COVID, by about like 800 students, and then it rebounded, it actually has helped us budgetarily because of the way the tax cap adjustment works. It's like a one-way ratchet. So even though our enrollment is about 200 or 300 students lower than it was pre-COVID, since it's rebounded from like the COVID nadir, we've gotten tax cap adjustments, and it's benefited us by like, probably well over $1 million. So if our enrollment had just steadily fallen from 7,000 to like the current 67 or 6,800, we wouldn't have gotten those adjustments, and we'd be in worse budget pain than we are now. It seems like school districts, like they do hire demographers, but I think actually it's just a crazy situation, like with what's happening nationally, that any demographer's estimate, I wouldn't have a lot of faith in it. There's going to be a Trump effect. It's going to reduce immigration, and there's even actually an effect on Democratic, meaning big D Democratic birth rates when there's a Republican president. There was a big drop in blue areas in the country in Trump's first term. So, in our school district, South Orange Maplewood, births really did fall a lot in the late 2010s. They had been like in the high 400s, like before Trump, and they fell to as low as 406. So who the heck knows what's going to happen? Yes, we should hire a demographer. It's just the professional thing to do, but we have no idea what's really going to happen. Anyways, that's just something the board and community can discuss. I did have a question about fund balance, because fund balance in a way is kind of like the hero of this budget cycle. I went into this budget cycle expecting a deficit similar in size to last year, but we actually don't. We are using some attrition, which is not good. But it's not as bad a budget cycle as last year or what I expected. Is there anything you can say about where our fund balance comes from? Does it have anything to do with the fact that we had a lot of vacancies this year? We had 30 vacancies at one point,
So most of that fund balance, well, a lot of it is also, as obviously at the start of the year, departments, schools ask for a certain amount of money to spend to cut POs on certain items. I would say, I'm going to average, they probably didn't, about 50% of those POs were not issued. They didn't issue them in time. In all honesty, you should issue, as a former principal, I'm spending all my money before the new year. Always have, always will. So a lot of that's POs, but also, as you noted, Jeff, it's also vacancies and not filling spots that we didn't need to fill. It also goes back to the fact that, you know, as we mentioned at the last board meeting, we came into this without any comparables. About, you know, 40–50% of Systems 3000 was filled. So therefore, it really forced us to do zero-based budgeting and go line by line, and then having individuals come into the office and justify what those expenses were. So it really gave us a better lens on, hey, we really don't need this. You're not getting the benefit from this contract, and enabled us to cut a lot of things that were just not needed.
And, you know, what I'll add, and I think, you know, the superintendent's commentary was on essentially addressing the makeup of that which we were able to save within the 24-25 year to add to fund balance, projected June 30 fund balance. That said, fund balance itself is, it's almost like the concept between assets equals liabilities plus equity. It's the equity, it's the remainder that exists, but that is there for the prudent fiscal management of the district from a year-over-year standpoint. So it is prudent to save some money and to have some, you know, for some available funds for use in the event of threat or opportunity. So it's built into the process of management of a school budget that you have fund balance, and you should have that fund balance and engage in protection of that fund balance for the longer-term fiscal stewardship. So as such, you know, Superintendent Bing talks about the fact that, so if year over year you're budgeting and you're just being given a number like 3% growth over your last year, you're not taking into consideration like your inventories and that which currently exists on the shelves. So there's a lot of moving parts, right? So, but when you engage in a new process of zero-based budgeting from the ground up, and you really assess your specific needs, then, and you also, as things are shifting around the district, you're able to move inventories and things of that nature. When you do this meticulous process, you can carve out that which is unnecessary to be expended, and then add to your fund balance. So this is the practice that we need to continually engage in over the course of budget management for the 25-26 year and beyond. Really looking at the moving parts and what's necessary and right-sizing our distribution of resources for the purpose of moving some of those funds back to fund balance for the protection of South Orange Maplewood School District moving forward.
It's not great, sir. You have to account for all components of the budget. That's it. And when you open up the process and you make it collaborative, you're getting different eyes on that budget. You know, shout out to Ann, shout out to Tom, Stanley, shout out to all our department heads. When you bring people in a room consistently and you have different eyes on the budget, it really helps you figure out what you need to prioritize and what's really not needed. And that process was really never done in the district over the last few years, and I think that really made the process a lot more effective and efficient, just bringing experts and folks into the room and making this a more collaborative. So, you know, big shout out to the senior leadership team, to our principals, to our supervisors. You know, we had conversations with our teachers, just for everybody who had their eyes on the budget moving forward.
Right, that goes all the way down into software licenses.
Yep.
Do you have a site license where, you know, it can be collapsed and strategically purchased, right? I mean, right-sizing how many individuals are using that particular software and what are projected needs. These are things that, unless you're engaging in the dialogue and the research, you're not going to know. And so that's what we've been you know, basing our decision-making on.
And you had people stepping up in regards to monitoring and making sure big projects were accountable for, such as Mr. Bonds over my right shoulder, who has been on top of the CHH stage, Columbia stage, since it started, and we're still on track, knock on wood. But that's also a big part of making sure you're monitoring our expenses. You have people like Mr. Bond stepping up.
Just to echo, you know, it's been a very different process this year, so thank you. It's been really, as a board member who was on FFT last year, very different type of process, and I think the collaboration that you talked about tonight was really evident. I do remember last year asking a little bit about the hiring as it related to enrollment. That was something that I had noticed last year and asked about. Just wondering, in your discovery process, do you have a clear understanding of what drove some of the decision-making to continue hiring in spite of the enrollment decreases?
I think as Lonnie noted, there wasn't a lot there when we came into the budget, because usually in System 3000 or whatever financial system you're using, there's a description column that's really filled out, so you know exactly why, what's the rationale, and that just wasn't there. So it's very difficult, especially when you're going literally through paper purchase orders, which I haven't done in 15 years, because everybody is now digital, trying to figure out what was this PO for. And you can only do that to a certain amount of going through files looking for paper POs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess to follow up, given the vacancies that we talked about and the decision to prioritize internal transfers rather than external hiring, can you speak to how our current staffing levels position us to fill those vacancies? Are we in a stronger position, presumably, to fill those needs, given that we've increased staff in spite of enrollment declining?
Yeah, I think the beauty of our staff, and we talk about this quite often, we have a high level of masters, I think one of the top in the states, and a lot of people with multi-certifications, and a lot of people with certifications that you need for positions that are very hard to fill. So I think we're in a very good position to leverage those hires over the last few years to fill positions that, for example, one of our mandates, and Liz leads the special ed, well, it wasn't a committee when it was an ad hoc, now it's an official committee, was to make sure that no students were kicked out of their own school for one of the least restrictive strategy in-class support and had to go to another school because their grade level didn't supply in-class support. So, you know, we'll be able to utilize 4 in-house folks to fill those spots. So now we can, you know, proudly say that all grade levels will have in-class resource support, K to 5. And then obviously as our schools grow, we'll be doing the same thing and adding on to those grade levels that are added on to the schools. So we'll have a full continuum of those services.
You know what, I'd also like to add that, you know, one of the first things that happened when I came into the district, oh, so long ago in December, was, you know, being as though around 80% of our budget is, directed towards personnel, or, 70, 80. The fact is, just the sheer logistics of refining or understanding what's at play in your financial accounting system require you to do a meticulous construction of what's called the position control roster, the PCR, right? Which documents every position and the compensation and the classroom. Now, when you encounter a situation where your financial accounting system is not in direct specific alignment with your payroll system and with other systems, I knew that what was ahead of me is to reconcile those to make certain that it's all working with the same information, and that the analysis is further buttressed by an actual school-by-school count as to who works there, right? That project was headed up by our HR department, and when departments aren't talking to each other and sharing and working from the, singing from the same hymnal down to the dollar, then you have a recipe for discord. So essentially harmonizing the systems to make certain you're working with the same position control roster across, and that it's actually verified at the building level, then now you're working from an accurate accounting of where everyone is. So you can make judgments around what positions are unfilled or unnecessary to fill or have not had the demand in prior years, things of that nature. So a great amount of discovery comes from the reconciliation of the systems that govern both the financial accounting and payroll.
And you've heard the same thing, right? If our mandate, which it is to move to a data-driven decision-making organization, then those are the things you need in place, and they just don't appear, right? It takes about a year or so to put those things in place and then put standard operating procedures on how to utilize those things in place, and then we become a data-driven organization, but we're not there yet. Hopefully we'll get there within the next year or so, but that's the work that we have to continue to work on.
Just circling back to the fund balance comment and question. It seems to me, I mean, I agree with Jeff, it seems like that's been an unsung hero in terms of helping us with our budget, as well as, using some of our other reserves, which I understand, but what I'm kind of concerned about is it seems like the fund balance this year was a unique circumstance in a way, in that we did do a hiring freeze, we really looked at everything, and certainly next year we will continue that process, but I'm guessing that we're not going to find quite as much because you've already done such a thorough job this year. And, we are projected to have our reserves go down significantly by the end of 2026. So I'm just thinking ahead to future years. Am I correct to assume that whatever we put forth in this coming budget, we're going to have to make some real, more serious decisions for the years to come? Because it's not sustainable. And I'm getting the sense that what we're doing right now is not sustainable, given that how much we've dug into the reserves and into the balance. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. That is the message that we're attempting to convey here, is that, but I'll refine it a bit. I would say that my mission has been to show and to bring to a larger set of eyes the trajectory of the district in terms of its fiscal stewardship of resources, right? The way to turn the ship does involve continuing year-over-year refinement of the deployment of resources and the discovery around ways to achieve more in the way of operational efficiency and other categories of revenue and funding, right? And other kinds of, God forbid, taxes or tax growth or population growth, things of that nature. So yes, we were able to return some monies to fund balance in a projected way for fiscal 25. We will be called upon to engage in that same strategy in 25-26 to attempt to return funds to fund balance and decline the amount of which we have to dig in there for access to resources to fund the district. So yes, that is intentional, and it's entirely consistent with the numbers that we've inherited, essentially. These numbers come from our budget, our audit, which we just finalized and represent the activity in the year prior to our arrival. So we received the $7 million in use in 2025 from prior administration and the 6.893 for use in 2026, right? So yeah, that is the case. So we are called upon as fiscal stewards of the district, as board and district leadership, to do just that and be prudent over the next years because of where this trend is heading.
I think also as we really develop a solid, I'll piggyback on Imani, a solid PCR, you're going to get some aha moments there. But we're not there yet, right? And Regina can tell you how long she's been trying to get there. Once we get that roster, you're going to have some aha moments that are going to lead to savings and efficiencies. When we get deeper into facilities, we're going to get to a point where we're going to have more aha moments and hopefully be able to do more efficiencies. We haven't even talked about energy yet. That's a road district has not gone down as of yet. That Bill's been pushing for quite some time, and we're about to go down that road. So you're looking at efficiencies and hopefully savings. You're looking at a lot of different, these departments have layers and layers and layers, and it takes more than just 6 months to understand all those layers, whether it's special services, curriculum and instruction, facilities. It's years of layers that have been developed, and it just takes a little time to peel that onion. But yeah, I 100% of what Deidre just said, and Jeff and Imani, we're going to have to be lean moving forward. We cannot predict what's going to happen with federal funding. We can take a guesstimate that we'll receive flat state funding for the remainder of the run of this formula. They may change the formula in 2 years, which would impact us as well. There's a lot of different factors out there, but we have to be prudent.
So yeah, my comment is more of a request that I'm sure you will be doing without me saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. For the budget presentation in April, when we've had our small group meetings, we've dug into a lot of the details of looking at the year over year and things that were making us go over budget and was causing the deficit. And so in April, I think it'll be really important for the community to also see all the work that has been done behind the scenes, looking at year over year, looking at our contracts and showing number-wise, the actuals of how that budget was, how that deficit was closed with what is being removed, cut, or whatever from the expenditures and what is being shifted, so that it's easy for the community to also see the work that was done behind the scenes to get that deficit closed and to understand the decisions that are being made to, whether it's the renegotiation of contracts or whatever it is, and especially when going to board of school estimate, I know the bulk of what we're talking to them about will be more facilities-based, but if other things should come up, whether it is transportation or special services, for them to, they will be looking for that year-over-year projections and wanting to understand, to Board Member Brown's point, what are we doing to also rein it in, and what are we doing to make sure that we aren't just constantly dipping into funds because it isn't sustainable. And we don't like to always go to board of school estimate, but we do realize that the realities in front of us are that it's the next couple of years will be difficult financially. So that's all I wanted to say.
A big push for us, and we've discussed this many a times, is making sure we're ahead of facilities. Right, we're 20 years behind right now in regards to maintenance. So we have a great director in place that has a great plan that's going to lead right into our long-range facility plan, which really will be our blueprint for the next 5 years of what we're going to do and how we're going to maintain these schools to make sure they serve our students in the most optimal way.
Yeah, I think there's a common thematic of the concerns that we're going to raise. Well, first off, thank you for everything that you've done here. Even just in my few months and being a parent in the audience last year, seeing that this is what I think will be a true baseline for the future looking of a budget where we don't hopefully have to be in a year-to-year scramble again. I mean, I think we can all agree that we want to be there. And I think we can all agree that using reserves to balance a budget is suboptimal. Just doing the math that you've seen that in front of us. I think over the next few weeks, while we acknowledge that this is an acknowledgement of a path forward, over the next few weeks, not only will we be providing information for the public, but I think the board will be requesting a lot of information to understand what has gone into this and how we got to the spot. Mainly to avoid, we're not as an intention to turn over stones or look through the couches for extra change. It's going to be more about, are we going to get caught blindsided with anything else that we might have missed, right? Just to allay those concerns that are out there. But I think also we all agree that risks are not the way to go. We know that maintenance shouldn't be touched, special services should not be touched, the classrooms should not be touched. But we should be looking at areas, particularly in the short term, that we can look at right now. And then one of the areas I would, preliminary ask is more detail around transportation costs, whether it be out of district, general services, general education, the III, by mileage, the distance, all those things that are going there. Because I think those are things that we could look at right now that don't require impacts to actually what happens in the classroom.
Oh, absolutely. We do agree. And that's why we spoke on the fact that we're really looking at each potential contract for areas of possibility to optimize it, right? To do things more efficiently. We're continuing to have conversations with our contract providers, particularly in transportation, to explore all those kinds of scenarios where we might achieve some savings and increase efficiency.
Thank you. So, again, thank you both for that. I know it's been a lot of work, and I as somebody, this is my third budget cycle. The amount of information that we have all gotten, and just honestly, even in the past couple of weeks, has been really tremendous. I think Nubia noted some of this stuff came in a little last minute, and so I'm still trying to process a lot of this. So to Bimel's point, there's likely going to be from today until April 24th, just lots of further questions. So my first two are more like comments, I think, as we look to the final budget presentation. Really, I think, Mr. Bing, you've articulated it verbally, but being able to show how does the budget priorities, as you've stated here, tie back to the district goals is going to be really important, not only for the board, but the community as well. Mr. Moody, you've talked a lot about, planning for the future, right? I think you said 3 years. Anything you might be able to show in April that shows those 3-year projections, I think would be helpful. I sat here last year and, I think we all realized that had never been done, looking into the future. And so it's exciting to hear, and I think trying to put that to pen to paper and share that with the community would be great. I think there's a couple of personnel questions that I'm not necessarily going to ask outright here, some that probably just can't be asked, but just to think about also in our next committee meeting, but, just thinking about the increase in staffing, that was about 60% that were teachers. So that leaves about, 40% of other staff. I don't know what that is. So trying to also dig into that so that we can understand better the teacher to student ratio, the support staff to student ratio, admin to student ratio, kind of like all of those numbers. And, I think there are some other positions out there that have been discussed, whether they've been in a previous RIF, like director of guidance, like is that, how, if and how we are planning to bring that back. Those are discussions that I think we want to be having because, as you know, from just current and previous board members and also the community, there's a lot of questions on what potentially we could bring back without, of course, dipping into and riffing any other positions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Board Member Eckert, we definitely anticipate that the job of research and discovery and presentation is not done. We're grateful and optimistic and hopeful that we are engaged in a thorough and efficient budget process, right? We have a team spirit, a decorum of tying all of our decision-making around to aligning with budget priorities, right? And that was in our budget philosophy from the beginning: student achievement, optimizing current programming and staffing, and addressing continuing capital improvement needs, right? And I'm a firm believer that, getting the priorities as your North Star, it simply allows you to engage in more effective decision-making around, individual account lines, individual projects, individual contracts. And so student achievement, optimizing current programming and staffing, and addressing continuing capital improvement needs were sort of the marching orders in the beginning of this process. And so it's the prism through which we've been evaluating everything. And of course, this remaining march towards April and towards final budget will be about the business of doing more in the way of discovery there and sharing in our forums for interaction there. And, it's just, we're called upon to make tough decisions. And we have to think about this in terms of year-over-year long-term success, right? And we have to sort of allow ourselves to consider some of these things, adjustments in priority, things that are adjusting both a time frame of bringing to fruition or potentially a funding source, right? So we widen the lens of our thought process, engage in the communication, make the decisions, and then we can all rally around a budget that seeks to provide for everyone. So that's the mission.
Yes, and I want to echo the thank you that I know you all have been working so hard, so I really appreciate it. And I just want to kind of piggyback on what's been said. I think it seems like you all have been working tirelessly to try and figure out how we can not have a deficit this year, put money towards maintenance and other needs for our students. I think, it seems like from what you're saying, we're in a place now where we feel, obviously, more discovery is needed. We need to kind of continue looking at the contracts, see where we can continue optimization. But at some point soon, I hope we're getting to a place where we can have numbers in front of us that's kind of a breakdown of, transportation by, the various areas, special services, guidance, central office, core subjects, professional development, so that we can start to understand, okay, what are we projecting? What did 24, 25 look like in these areas? And then, also kind of like a cost per student, I think would be helpful to understand, by supplies, by teacher, by administration. And then even like the maintenance, what are we including in this budget? The 5 million, what is that going to cover versus what are we going to go to the Bose for? So I know that I'm sure you're getting there. But the sooner that we can kind of have that breakdown of numbers, I think will allow us to continue to have great discussions and to start to make hard decisions on priorities based on the goals that you stated, because we are going to have to start making hard decisions.
Absolutely, thank you for that, but I would characterize it just slightly differently. I would say that this process is a process which is an amalgamation of various different communication forums, right? As we went through, small group board meetings, finance committee meeting, budget advisory. So within those, and I think your fellow board members will agree, we have gotten down into those excruciating details on certain of the things that you mentioned. Widening that conversation and amplifying that message is, of course, before us between now and for the remainder until budget clearance. So I think some of that discovery currently exists. It can be refined and tweaked and then further proliferated, but we've definitely got into those details. But there's always room for improvement, and there's always more analysis that can be done. Your per pupil requests and stuff like that, we can definitely do a little bit more of that and distribute that more widely across the board. But we've covered a lot of that in our finance, facilities, and technology meetings and our small group meetings. But we will continue that effort and refine it even further.
So echoing some of what both of you have just said, this has been a lengthy process and a process of, as you've talked about, zero-based budgeting. We're not just taking last year and saying we're going to do X percentage of this and so on, which has led to, I think, a longer process of identifying all of these. And we've gotten some very exquisitely detailed pieces. We've seen the grounds and facilities budget, and literally they have planned out how much they're spending on every screw in every building. We don't yet have that for every other department. We know this is forthcoming, and we do have a lot of these top-line numbers right now, as well as some more analyses that are pending. It would be helpful, we've talked about this some offline, but if you would just for us and the public remind us of this process. Right now, we're taking this budget and approving it to be sent up to the county superintendent for approval, and still iterating over the next month before our April meeting. Would you remind us exactly how that process works as far as numbers that can still move and what's happening between now and that final meeting?
Sure, absolutely. Essentially, like the presentation demonstrated, here we are today, March 13th. We have through to March 19th to enter our preliminary budget into the state software and upload that, which involves 60 pages of data being typed into the system, and then as well as a narrative from our superintendent, as well as information around curriculum and instruction and the different guiding thoughts around our budget. After we enter all of that and we render our tax levy information that comes from that state system, then we engage in continuing dialogue and thought process and conversation to make a final budget, right? We're looking between today being March 13th to March 19th and then out through April to make final adjustments and to engage in further discourse about where our priorities are and what the numbers actually indicate. Right? This is what we've been discussing. And then ultimately, we look out towards, and I can pull up the calendar again, but we look out towards an April upload of our budget. Let me see.
We also have the advantage, we've been working pretty closely with John Ferraro, the county BA, Joe Zarro, our county soup, I've
do?
known
Actually, I have it.
30 years. I think the advantage of myself being new, Amani, Andrew, they've been really quite helpful. They've been in quite a bit. Our communication has been wonderful with them. John has been here more than a few times to walk our buildings. We meet with Joe every month. So in addition to the work our auditors have been doing, I think we're in a good place in regards to being able to continue to work on this budget over the next few weeks and submit a balance, but also a budget that's really future-oriented. That looks out 2, 3, 4 years.
And to be explicit, after March 19th, which is our tentative budget upload to the state, then we have April 21st, preparation of our advertised budget for submission to the Board of School Estimates. We have budget approval by the Executive County Superintendent on April 21st. We have our notice of public hearing first, on April 20th. And then full regular meeting of the Board of Education, Thursday, May 1st, April elections. So let's see. Our board meeting to have our public hearing, 24th, yeah. Just board meeting, public hearing on the 25th, 26th budget, final budget presentation, approval to submit to the county, April 24th. You're welcome.
I'm just chiming in here because I did want to highlight something that, there's a lot of things that have been different in this budget cycle versus recent ones. The ongoing town halls, I think, will be really great. I know you've had many, many community conversations, town halls, whatever you're calling them, I think would be great. And then I think, and maybe it's for like the next board meeting, but the Budget Advisory Committee, which I know has been brand new. I believe there's been 2 meetings. And I don't know if there's been an established kind of like forum in which somebody from the committee does some sort of read. I don't know what it is. It's brand new. I know you've done it before in the past in previous districts, but I think internally the board has been able to share some notes for those that have been observing. But I guess, and I say this because actually I happen to be acquaintances with a committee member, and they asked how does the sharing of information happen? So maybe putting some together, formalizing that for the next committee meeting, and then figuring out how that shares out to the public.
Was there a question there, or do you want me to respond to that? Okay, no. Oh, no, thank you. I thought you maybe wanted some insight into what was taking place during those. But I know several board members were also there with us during those budget advisory council meetings, so.
I think some people, one of last year's most controversial risks was the elimination of the head of guidance. And I was just wondering if there's anything you can say about budgeting for that position for next year?
It's currently in this draft of the budget.
I think
position
the community will welcome that. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to now go into public speaks. I'll read the board president's statement, hearing of individuals, and then we'll go from there. Sound good? Yeah, go for it. All right, so the school board meeting. Yeah, this is it. Oh, wait. Oh, Regina, are you trying to get this? Sorry, I thought you said something else. The school board meeting is a business meeting in public and not a meeting with the public. Oftentimes, it may appear to members of our audience that the Board of Education takes action with very little comment, and in many cases, a unanimous vote. Before a matter is placed on the agenda at a public meeting, it has thoroughly been reviewed by the administration, the superintendent of schools, and the Board of Education, after which it is placed on the agenda for the board discussion and action at a public meeting. Okay, Now for a hearing of individuals. Thank you for coming in person and joining us online this evening. The South Orange Maplewood Board of Education values public involvement and respects that you've taken the time to address the board at tonight's meeting. As this is the board's business meeting, a friendly reminder to please be respectful as we take into consideration your valuable input, which will inform future deliberations and work by the Board of Education and its committees. The board does have time limits by policy, and it will be enforcing those to enable us as many people to speak as possible this evening. Each individual will be given 3 minutes to speak. The first public comment period is usually limited to 1 hour with priority given to items related to the meeting agenda, and the second public comment period may be limited to 30 minutes. Okay, so we have...
Hi, Jason Bing, 525
Oh.
Academy Street. I just wanted to send out kudos to the board, to the BA, and also the superintendent. Just
Okay, we're going to have to get him
want
off
to
the
commend
mic.
them on the great job.
Very well done, thank you.
Too much. Okay, so Carrie, you've been waiting so patiently. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm a former PTA president at the Tuscan School, and I was on the President's Council. I'm reading a statement from a group of parents who are applying to pre-K this year. On January 26, 2025, Temple Oheb Shalom hosted a celebratory event with an Israeli soldier who was active in Gaza during the ongoing genocide of Palestinians. The temple also displays a large Israeli flag on the building, a political symbol utilized by a country as it currently commits war crimes. Many community members have privately raised concerns because of this insensitivity and thus do not want their children placed at the Mickey Fried Preschool located in Oheb Shalom, which is a new SOMSD pre-kindergarten site. We have spent the last 16 months witnessing the devastating loss of tens of thousands of Palestinian children brutally murdered with their schools and homes destroyed by Israel using U.S. bombs and our tax dollars. For some of us, our own children resemble these children, heightening our concern. Preschoolers are especially vulnerable, and as they are not equipped to advocate for themselves or recognize racism when it occurs. We believe it is essential for the district to publicly and officially inform all pre-K applicants that in response to these legitimate concerns, they have the option to opt out of placement at Mickey Fried and choose an alternative pre-K site without penalty. SOMSD is obligated under its own policy to ensure that students from marginalized groups are supported and to uphold its commitment to equity, inclusivity, and the safety of all students in our current political reality. This includes supporting pro-Palestine allies who speak out against genocide. Their advocacy is often falsely conflated with anti-Semitism in an effort to silence criticism of Israel. The district has already assured us that should parents decide to decline the Oheb Shalom placement, they will not lose their child's spot in the pre-kindergarten program. Instead, a suitable alternative placement will be made available to them for the start date noted in their acceptance letter. Parents who want to opt out of Oheb Shalom pre-K site should email the school district immediately. Please email preskinfo@somsd.k12.njus and CC Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Jason Bing. Your outreach should be preemptive ahead of final placements. This is Wadi, 6 years old. He was stabbed to death by his landlord for being Palestinian in Illinois. This is Reem. She's 3 years old, killed in a bombing of her home. Her grandfather called her the soul of his soul. This is Omar. He's 5 years old. His father carried the bloody pulp of his body in a plastic bag, crying, "My children are dead. My children are dead." This is Salma, 4 years old, killed by an Israeli sniper, shot in the neck, and died in her father's arms. This is Hind, 5 years old. A tank shot her car with 350 bullets. She was the last survivor. A made a call to the rescue squad. "I'm so scared. Please come." Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. So there's no online speaks, so we will move to the action portion of the meeting. Wait for Mr. Bing to come to sit back down. Okay, so we are going to the action portion of the meeting. Mr. Moody, can you please read the resolutions into record? Oh, Mike, Mr. Moody, can you put your mic on, please?
Sorry about
Thank you.
that. Here to take actions on resolutions for Resolution 4585A and 4735B, 4735C. To approve the preliminary budget submission, to authorize insurance coverage for District Club's parent organization, and approving attendance and work-related travel for workshops.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion on these items?
Yeah, we have,
Say a few things about the resolutions that we advanced in FFT. Resolution 4735B authorizes insurance coverage for the parent organization, the Muslim Arab Student Union, under the district's NJSIG policy for the 2024-25 school year. This aligns with standard practice as all groups using district facilities need insurance. Resolution 4735C simply approves travel and workshop expenses of $250 for 2 employees attending the INRS to MTSS conference.
All right, thank you.
any other comments, discussion? No? Okay, great. So roll call, please, to vote.
Sure, roll call. Board Member Bennett.
Yes.
Board Member Brown.
Yes.
Board Member Callahan.
Yes.
Board Member Duval Wilson.
Yes.
Board Member Eckert.
Yes.
Board Member Gifford.
Yes.
Board Member Kapadia.
Yes.
Board Member Meyer.
Yes.
And Board Member Sackett Gable.
Yes. Okay, that concludes the action portion of the meeting. Next, we would do hearing of delegations, but we don't have any, and we just did it. So our meeting is so short tonight, which is nice. So I will announce the future meetings. The Board of Education will meet again in public session on Thursday, March 27th, 2025, at 6:30 p.m. for our monthly meeting. Action will be taken. And now I will adjourn. Mr. Moody, I would now like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting on Thursday, March 13th at 8:53 p.m. Do I have a second? Thank you. We'll do Bill today. Thank you, Board Member Kapadia. And all in favor? Awesome. Great. Thanks. Meeting is adjourned.